More about this now. Joining us from Houston, Texas is Jose Luis Zelaya. He fled Honduras when he was just 14 years old and is now a student at Texas A&M University. We're also joined by John Baker, a visiting law professor at Georgetown University, and Marco Cáceres, editor of Honduras Weekly. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Jose, let me start with you. You are one of those young men who fled Honduras, escaping the violence there. You did that when you were 14 years old. Tell us about that experience.
Of course. Well, good morning, first of all. I think that in order to understand my story, I think that it's important to understand the environment. As we see the violence and the poverty, it's extreme. In my case, whenever I was 5 years old, I had to witness how my mother cried while she was holding my younger brother, who was 3 years old, and he passed away in her arms because we didn't have money to take him to the hospital. And it was things like this that we didn't have much to eat on a daily basis. I was the man of the house because my dad was an alcoholic man who abused my mother. At the age of 9, on my way to school, I was stabbed on my head by gang members because they came in the bus and they robbed us. In year 1998, Hurricane Mitch destroyed our little place that we had, and we were homeless. Not only did we not have food, but we were also living in a very violent place. So my mother made the decision to come to the United States, to run away from my father, to run away from poverty, to run away from violence. But my father forced me to stay behind for almost 2 years without my mother. And during this time, I was a victim of gang violence during a soccer game. I was playing soccer, and gang members came into the neighborhood and they started shooting, and I was shot twice in both of my arms. And it was then when I said, forget this. I'm going to go look for my mom. I'm tired of this. I'm afraid. I'm desperate. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. And I took a journey to the United States on my own, without family, without friends. And I came to this country. I don't really even know how I made it, but I made it. And now I'm given the opportunity to be a college student. But the journey itself was very, very horrible. I have 6 surgeries now. I have a nose reconstruction, 4 knee surgeries. We walked a lot. We walked for days with little water. I rode the train, and in the train, I saw how a man lost his life. And whenever you're in that moment, there is no time to cry. There is no time to dwell on that because you may be next. So I just stayed focused on reaching the United States and trying to find my mom. And thankfully, I was able to do that. But I know that a lot of people, sadly, are not able to make the entire journey, and including a lot of these children that are coming to the United States. I understand their story. I know that they're afraid. I know what they're running from. But I also know what they can become if we give them the opportunity, because I have become what the United States gave me.
Right.
It gave me an education. And these children can too become educated.
Okay. Marco, when we hear a story like that, that is one story that we're hearing, but how pervasive is this kind of violence in Honduras, and how widespread is it?
First of all, what he just said couldn't be said more eloquently. It really does sum up the problems in Honduras. I think if you were to ask the children that you see on the border right now with the U.S. About their stories, more than 90% of them would probably give a very similar account. The fear, the violence, the crime in Honduras is pervasive. It is a huge, huge problem. One of the big problems right now in this debate about the crisis on the border and the whole illegal immigration issue is that in the United States, we can't agree on what's causing the problem. Why are these kids coming? You see 2 or 3 different points of view. And until we understand this better and come to some sort of a general consensus about why these children are here, it's going to be very difficult to come up with a solution.
Right, I want to get to that in a moment. But John, when we look at the violence in Honduras, which has now entered the U.S. debate on immigration, even humanitarian debate here in this country, the Obama administration is now talking about granting refugee status to the children who are escaping the violence in Honduras and coming to the United States. Is that a major change of policy for the United States?
Well, first of all, I want to go to the question of violence. The violence is real, but it's not new. I was in Honduras in 2004 as part of a mission from USAID. It was violent then, and we had guards, and we were told where not to go, and these conditions are real. The reason why we were down there was to help change the conditions. At the time, Honduras and the other countries in Central America had, over the opposition of the left, had finally entered into the CAFTA agreement in order to help improve things in these countries. And there have been efforts in Honduras, and Honduras has made some strides. It is a real problem. But to say this is the cause is completely false. And the evidence of it was exposed by Byron York in the Washington Examiner, and reflecting on a hearing that was held in the Congress. The reality is, when these kids were stopped at the border, a report from the Southern Border Patrol says they all said they were coming here because the DACA, Deferred Action on Children, was about to end. There was no mention of the violence as being a cause. Yes, the violence is there, but it's been there for years.
Sorry, just explain that, what you mentioned, the deferred action on children.
Deferred action was something enacted under the Bush administration. It was designed to prevent sending back children to Central America who had been victims of human trafficking. Most of these kids, indeed all of these kids, as far as we can tell, are not the victims of human trafficking. Many of them are the victims of the smugglers who come, through whom they have to come to reach here. It's a very dangerous situation, but even the Secretary of Homeland Security has admitted that this was the draw. They knew it. And as I told you before, the GSA, the Government Services Administration, issued a document in January soliciting private contractors to take these children in. The story of the administration is, we didn't know this was happening. It was a sudden surge. This is nonsense. The evidence is there. The administration knew it was going to happen. They encouraged it to happen. And what's even more important is, it's not just a humanitarian crisis. This is a diversion from what is an invasion of the United States. We have lots of drug traffickers coming through. We know the Central American countries and Mexico have said they want to legalize drug trafficking because they can't handle it. We have what are called special interest aliens who are coming in. These are suspected terrorists. We know that the number of crimes, including murders and rapes, has been skyrocketing. There is a real invasion here, and under the Constitution, we have to do something about it. And no other country, I mean, Israel is talking about it right now. They are defending their borders.
But we do have a situation like Jose has just described to us. And Jose, I want to get back to you. As John was saying, you know, it's dangerous traveling from a Central American country to come to the United States. And you told us earlier on about your experience and why you'd left and the conditions that you left behind. But just take us through the kinds of dangers that you faced on your way here to the United States.
For sure. You know, I think that it's important to acknowledge you know, what he's saying. I think that he brings a great point that violence is something that has existed for many years. But what have we done to be able to help the conditions there? And deferred action is actually something that happened under Obama's administration. And these children actually do not qualify for deferred action because the requirements are completely different than a refugee status, number one. But also, the journey is very painful. Whenever you're a child and you're walking alone, whenever you are, you know, for instance, for me, I was given to a smuggler in Guatemala, and then that smuggler gave me to another person, and then to another person, and then to another person, to the point that you just forget who you're with and who's helping you and who's not helping you. There's things as you're not allowed to speak because my Central American accent could have made me become a victim of violence, even in Guatemala or in Mexico, because of the cartels. But some of the things that I experienced, I remember this one time we were at this small house, and it was filled with a lot of people, a lot of children, and then like about 2 in the morning, the smuggler, the coyote, just woke up with the gun in his hand, and he was sexually abusing a child. And he said, whoever says anything is going to be next. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that these children are willing to go through these circumstances because the situations in their home countries are worse. For instance, for myself, I was telling you earlier, I rode the train. And whenever I was in the train, I was just very afraid because of the stories that people said. And I witnessed how a man fell off the train, losing his life. But once again, I did not want to go back to Honduras. There I was shot. There I was stabbed. There I was hungry. I was a street child, sleeping in the streets. not knowing what my life was going to be. So whenever you're in the journey, you're not really thinking that you're breaking the law. You're not really thinking that you are going to apply for this very complex immigration process. What you are thinking is that you are thinking about running away from these situations. You're thinking about reunifying with your families. You're thinking about the opportunity to live. And that's exactly why I came.
Right. Marco, last week, the Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, was here. He was interviewed on Fox News. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about this.
Why don't they stop in Mexico? They continue their journey to the United States.
Bueno, entre otras cosas también hay
well, among other things, there's a lack of clarity in the migratory policy of the United States. The language is ambiguous. That's why the coyotes, or the human smugglers, take advantage of this situation.
So, Marco, there we heard the president say that the language is ambiguous. There's no clarity on, I guess, who constitutes a refugee coming to the United States here. What do you make of what he said?
Well, I think he has a point. I think the language is complex, certainly. But I think the bigger point is that that language is now being used by the coyotes, the people who are paid money, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to bring children or adults up here, and they're in Honduras, and they're marketing this as a way to encourage them to come to the United States, because this might be their only chance, because the United States is giving amnesty, for example, which may not be true, but that's what's being sold down there. So that's one reason, certainly, that so many children have come up recently. But I think now the Obama administration has put the word out in Honduras and other countries in Central America that, no, don't come, don't send your children, you will be sent back. So that may have slowed the migration.
Okay, John, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that as well in a moment, but we're going to have to take a break right now.